Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here to do the series tag for the book series that I read or continued or finished or started in 2020. This tag was originally created by Mara from Books Like Whoa. I will link her original video down below. She's wonderful, you should definitely check her out. I have just discovered her channel in 2020 and I'm just really loving her content, and I'm really excited to do this because I read a lot of books in series, and I actually read quite a few really great books in series in 2020, so I'm excited to talk about some of them today. Also, just like a warning in advance, I'm probably going to keep saying things like this year and mean 2020 and next year and mean 2021, even though I'm filming this at the beginning of January, so I apologize for that. I will correct myself in captions if necessary. Number one is, what is the best series that you caught up with this year that is still a work in progress? And I should have mentioned for a lot of these questions I have multiple answers because, again, I have just read some really wonderful books in series in 2020. And the first one is the Small Spaces series. This is Dead Voices by Catherine Arden, which is the most recent book in the series. I'm buddy reading this with my friend Katie from A Sea of Tomes. We've been buddy reading all the books in this series, and we plan to continue doing that. And this is a middle grade horror series that I am just really, really loving. I think the friendships are great. I think the creepy atmosphere is great. I've mentioned before I didn't get along with Catherine Arden's Winter Night trilogy, but I'm really, really loving these books. And another answer I have is the Tales of the Wendy series by Erin Michelle Skye and Stephen Brown. This is book 2, The Navigator, which is again the most recent book published in the series. Actually, for both of these, book 3 is coming out in 2021, so I'm very excited about that. This is an indie published historical fantasy series that is a retelling of Peter Pan. And I am just really enjoying this. I've talked before about how much I love Wendy as a character. I really like the concept of this series. I appreciate the way that the authors addressed some of the problematic or damaging elements of the original Peter Pan story, like Tiger Lily, for instance, like her portrayal. So yeah, I'm just really, really enjoying this series. I really enjoy the writing. It's like the perfect amount of quirky and kind of self-aware without being over the top. So yeah, I can't wait for book 3 to be published. And then my last answer for this question is like a little bit pushing it because it's not quite accurate, but I have Nomad by R.J. Anderson. This is the second book in the Flight and Flame trilogy. This is actually a reread. I reread this at the beginning of the year and I loved it just as much, if not more, than the first time. And actually for a while we only had this book and the first book in the series, but we are actually, like, they're getting republished and we're finally getting a third book in February of 2021, so this year. And I'm just really excited about it. This is a middle grade YA kind of crossover series that deals with Cornish folklore and fairies, and I just really, really enjoy it. I think the themes of the series are great. I actually have a full spoiler-free review on the first 2 books, so I will link that down below. But yeah, I can't wait for that book that we're getting after all these years. I'm very excited about it. Number 2, what is the best work in progress series that you are still catching up with? And I picked the Witchland series by Susan Dennard. This is Wind Witch, the second book, which I read in 2020. Yes, 2020. I almost said 2021. See, I'm glad I warned you guys. I'm just really loving the series. I love the world building. I love the way Susan Dennard writes. Her characters are just top notch. I absolutely adore them. And I actually own Sight Witch and Blood Witch, and I just need to get on them. Like, for a series that I'm loving as much as this one, it's kind of ridiculous I haven't continued, but I do plan to do that very soon so that I am caught up for Witch Shadow, which comes out later this year. Number 3 is, what was your favorite first book in a series this year? And once again, I have a lot of answers. I'll try to keep these pretty quick. The first one I have is 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. This is the first book in, I think, the series, I think it's just called the 100,000 Kingdoms series. But I am absolutely adoring this. Like, I loved the first book. This was my first N.K. Jemisin book, and I loved it so much that I now own 3 more of her books. And I really need to continue this trilogy soon because I just loved this book so much. I don't feel like I need to talk too much about N.K. Jemisin because a lot of people already know and love her. But I will say that if you have read some of her more popular things, I do think this book is well worth your attention. I have not read her, like, any other of her work, so that includes the very popular Broken Earth trilogy, but I just think this one was fantastic, this first book. I also have Raybearer by Jordan Afuego. I actually have a full review coming on this one. Hopefully that is already up. This is just one of my new favorite books. I think the world building is fantastic. The plot and the way that the plot works with the setting and the themes is just so impressive. Again, I love the characters. I love the character development. There's a romantic element that I think is done beautifully in this book. Lots of great friendships and found family, and just a lot of great critique of things like empire and colonization and prejudice, and I just really, really love what this series is doing. I am so excited for book 2, which is supposedly coming out sometime this year. We don't have a title or a cover or a release date, but I'm really hoping that we do get that this year. I also want to mention Beartown by Frederick Backman. Again, this one I should have a spoiler-free review up. I hope that's already up. But a lot of people know about this book. This is a really, really hard-hitting contemporary that deals with a lot of really dark themes in a very compassionate and thoughtful way. I really love the writing. This is translated by Neil Smith, by the way. And yeah, I know that I think this is going to be a trilogy. The second book is out. I do definitely want to get to that. But yeah, this is just an incredibly powerful reading experience. I buddy read this with my friend Olivia Savannah, and we both thought this was just incredible and really lived up to the hype for us. And then my last answer for this question is One Crazy Summer by Rita Williams Garcia. This is the first book in a middle grade historical fiction series. It's a trilogy that takes place in the 60s, I think. Yes. We follow our main character Delphine and her two younger sisters, and in this book they end up getting sent to stay with their mother, who they don't know very well. She left when they were very young, and she lives in Oakland, California, and this is in the 60s during like the Black Panther movement and just like the civil rights movement in general. And I just thought this was really fantastic. I'm so glad that Ashley from Bookish Realm recommended this series because I hadn't really heard of it before. And as she mentioned in that video, I think this book really does give a different perspective on the Black Panther Party than a lot of what we learn about in American media. So yeah, I just thought this was really well done. The writing is great. Like the voice of Delphine as a main character is really strong. Loved the family relationships and how messy they were. And I have actually read the second book, which I really enjoyed as well. So that's a series that I need to finish soon. Number 4, what is the first book in a series you read this year that you think should have just been a standalone, not a series? So this one, I haven't actually read the next book in the series. It's not even out yet. I think it was just announced relatively recently. But I'm going to say Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sanz. Now again, I haven't read the second book. The second book might be wonderful, but I really, really enjoyed this contemporary. I really liked the way it ended. I think it felt like a full and complete story to me. So I was really surprised when they announced that there's going to be a sequel. I don't know. I'm curious to see what people think of it, but like at this point, I don't really feel like this book needed one. I was really, really happy with how it like completed as a story. Number 5 is what is your most overhyped series of the year? I have a couple. The first one I want to mention is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I read this earlier this year. I was very happy to be asked to be part of that live show. I'm sorry I didn't like the book more, Margaret, but yeah, I really enjoyed the like discussion experience, but this book itself, I just really didn't like. I'm realizing that I really like Laini Taylor's earlier work a lot more than her later work. I just feel like her writing has gotten just so overwrought and over descriptive to the point where it's not even a pleasant reading experience anymore. It's just annoying. I thought the characters were very flat. I thought the plot wasn't even that great. I thought the central romance was extremely lackluster. I didn't really care about most of the characters we were supposed to. I did like Laszlo, but like I didn't really care about a lot of the character interactions involving him, so even that didn't help that much. Yeah, I like kind of the idea of this book, but the execution just really didn't work for me in basically any capacity. So I personally feel like that book was very overhyped. And then I also want to mention Furyborn by Claire Legrand. I read the first book, which is Furyborn, for Tome Topple last year, I mean. And I really didn't like it. Now I know that this one is very polarizing, so maybe I shouldn't say, maybe this one isn't as overhyped as I think Strange the Dreamer is, just because I know that other people really didn't like it as well. But yeah, I couldn't stand the characters, especially I think Ileana is her name, the one who is set 1,000 years later. I could not stand her. I didn't care about what happened to her really because she didn't care about anybody else either. She was also very inconsistent with her moral compass, and like I just got very sick of listening to her dither about whether or not she was going to do the right thing and help people, but then when she was making her own plans for how to save herself and the only 2 people that she cared about, they always seemed to depend on the goodness of other people, which was kind of frustrating. So yeah, I didn't like her. I found the past timeline to just be very boring. I thought both romantic plot lines were done very badly. Like one of them, the love interest was so flat and the romance was so cringy, and the other one, it was like he was an interesting character, but just the development of that relationship was kind of weird to me. Yeah, so that's a book I know a lot of people love, but it really didn't work for me, and I will not be continuing that series, either of those series. Number 6, what is a series that you DNF'd this year? So besides those 2 I just talked about, the Queens of Renthia series by Sarah Beth Durst. I read The Reluctant Queen with my friend Huck last year, sorry. So we read that book, and neither of us really cared for it. In some ways, I think it was a more engaging reading experience than the first book, but I didn't end up liking it as much as I did the first book. And based on some things I've read about where the series goes from there, I just don't think I'm interested in finishing that trilogy. And with this second book, there were just a lot of things about character decisions that frustrated me. We kind of had that trope of like just drawing things out for the sake of the story by not being specific, by not telling the main character why they need her help, or like not being clear about why somebody is dangerous. So yeah, it's just kind of annoying and not a series I feel really excited about finishing. Number 7, what was your favorite series finale of the year? And I want to mention A Mixture of Mischief by Anna Mariano. This is the third and final book in the Love, Sugar, Magic series. I have loved every book in this series, and this one was no different. This might be my favorite in the series, I don't know. But yeah, this is just wonderful. This is Own Voices for the Mexican-American representation, and our main character, Leonora, comes from a family of brujas, and in the first book, she decides that she doesn't want to wait until she's old enough to use magic. She wants to just start right now, and of course that causes a lot of trouble. And throughout the series, we really see Leo grow and realize that she can ask the people she cares about for help when she needs it. I just think that arc is done really well. I love the baking magic. I absolutely love the family dynamics in this. I cannot believe that Anna Mariano does not have sisters, because the sister relationships just felt so true to me. And just the family relationships in general were absolutely lovely. I just think the series has a lot of heart and a lot of just like fun and whimsy, but also some really great underlying themes and messages, and it's so underhyped. I just want more people to read this, and I just thought it was a wonderful finale to the series. Number 8, what was the biggest cliffhanger you had in a series this year? And I think that was probably Defy the World by Claudia Gray. This is a science fiction with a strong romantic element series, a trilogy that I have been really enjoying, and I did really enjoy this one. I didn't love it quite as much as book 1, but I do think it was a really great installment, and there is definitely kind of a cliffhanger at the end of this book, but luckily I had kind of prepared myself for that. So I'm holding out until the third book comes out in paperback in the US, whenever that happens. I think one of the reasons the cliffhanger didn't bother me as much as I might have expected is because these can be very emotionally intense books in like the best way, but they're definitely something where I don't want to marathon them necessarily. So this wasn't as frustrating of a cliffhanger experience as usual, but yeah, definitely do want to finish that series. Number 9 is, what is your favorite spin-off series you read this year? And this is really stretching it, but I don't read a lot of spin-off series, so I'm gonna just count this one so I can talk about it. That is the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm counting this as a spin-off series to The Hobbit, even though I know that's not really what it is. But I reread this series for the first time, and it was actually the first time that I had officially completed the whole series, because I never did finish Return of the King when I was younger, but I did in 2020. I read this trilogy as a buddy read with several friends, Katie, Vendy, and Kelsey, and we really, really loved reading this together. This ended up being a really perfect reading experience for 2020. I just love the themes in this book. I love the characters. The over-descriptive writing did not bother me like I was expecting it to. And yeah, this is a trilogy, like I know it's not for everyone, and I totally understand that, but I think that the themes and the characters just resonated so much more strongly for me as an adult, and especially with the kind of year that 2020 was. Number 10, what is your most anticipated next book in a series that you read this year that will come out next year? I'm sure I have a lot of answers for this, but I only picked a couple. One of them is the second Raybearer book, whenever that comes out, which I already mentioned, and I also want to talk about A Chorus Rises by Bethany C. Morrow. So this is a companion book, or a companion sequel, I think, and we follow a character who is not likable in the first book, which is A Song Below Water, which I really enjoyed that. I know that that has gotten kind of mixed reviews lately, but I thought that was a really compelling contemporary fantasy with a lot of really interesting like combinations of magic and the themes that the author was tackling. I thought that was done in a really interesting way, and I'm actually really excited for this companion book. I feel like the second book is maybe kind of setting up for like a mean girl redemption arc, which is something I can really enjoy when that's done well. Plus, you just find the magic and the magical creatures in this series to be really, really interesting. So I'm excited to get to that one. Number 11, what is your most anticipated series to catch up with next year based on what you read in that series this year? And I picked 2. The first one is the Magical Venice series by Holly Webb. This is The Maskmaker's Daughter, which was actually my first book of 2021. So spoilers for whenever I filmed that wrap up for January, because I really, really enjoyed this as well. This is a middle grade fantasy series that takes place in like a fantasy version of Venice in Italy, and I have just been really enjoying it. These are companion books. I just really enjoy the writing and the setting and the magic. I think the main characters are great. I think this series really balances that feeling of lightness and whimsy with some pretty dark topics or ideas. Like these are kids who are definitely dealing with things that children should not have to deal with. And I think Holly Webb shows that, but also overall keeping the story really fun. So yeah, I'm really loving those. And another one, which was a real surprise hit this year for me, was The Dark Days Club by Alison Goodman. I did not like another book I read by this author, but this was a very different kind of story, so I thought I would try it, and I absolutely fell in love with it. This is a historical fantasy paranormal-ish kind of series. I loved the main character, I loved the writing, I loved the way that the historical setting actually played a very important role in the story. I even really loved the kind of brooding bad boy love interest or potential love interest, because he didn't play into a lot of the things I find annoying about that trope. Yeah, I feel like I'm talking way too much about all of these answers, but I just really, really loved this book and I'm so excited to continue the series. Number 12, what is your favorite series that you finished this year? So I picked two that I haven't talked about yet, although obviously I loved the Lord of the Rings series and the Love Sugar Magic series, but I tried to pick two books that I had not mentioned before in this tag, and the first one is Winterling. So this is the Winterling trilogy by Sarah Prineas, and I just really liked this. These are very short books, and I think they have this kind of forest magic setting, or like I think the way I describe these books is like, if you are interested in kind of fae or old school kind of fairy fantasy, I think you would enjoy these. But if that's not your thing, I think you could still enjoy these, because the take on these fae or fair folk characters is like not really, I think, what people think of now as fae books, if that makes sense. I enjoyed the character development. I really enjoyed the healing magic and some of the other magical aspects, and I was just really surprised. I really enjoyed that series, and I was surprised because it wasn't one I had heard anyone talk about before. And then I also want to mention the Rose Legacy trilogy by Jessica Day George. I've talked about before how Jessica Day George is just such a cozy fantasy author for me, and this series was no different. I always love her characters. I think she does group dynamics really well, whether that is friendship or family or like a sprinkling of romance. And I just really enjoyed this one. I think there were a couple things about the final book that I think I would have liked to see more done with, but overall I definitely think this is a satisfying series and I really enjoyed it. I do want to mention, if you are very, very knowledgeable about horses, it has come to my attention this would probably not be a fun series for you, but I have very little knowledge about horses and very little experience, so I had a great time. But yeah, definitely recommend Jessica Day George in general, and I really enjoyed that series this year. Number 13, what is your favorite episodic series of the year? And so I think episodic in this case is like each book has like its own kind of story, even if they connect in a larger story. It's like there's a complete plot arc within each book. I think that's what that means. And I picked two, so I did want to mention the Magical Venice series, even though I just mentioned it in a previous question, just because I think these work so beautifully as companion books. I have loved all of the main characters and all of the different like kinds of stories, but they were all in the same setting and sometimes have characters or plot elements that overlap a little bit. But overall these do work separately, but I have been reading them in publication order and just really loving those books. And I also wanted to mention the Track series by Jason Reynolds. I read Ghost and Patina, which are the first two books. I read those both in 2020. I have loved every single thing that I have read from Jason Reynolds, and this series is no exception. I just think his character work is phenomenal. I love the way he writes his characters. You just get to know and love them so quickly, and with such a short book, I just think that's really impressive. The friendships are great. I think he does a really wonderful job of tackling heavy topics that kids are dealing with. Like, a lot of kids do go through things like this, and he does it in a way that feels appropriate while also like not sugarcoating things. I just am really, really loving this series. This is a contemporary series and each book follows a different kid on this track team, and we see kind of what they're dealing with like at home or with their family or other issues, and like how this track team and the friendships they're making and their dedication to the sport is an important part of their life and kind of helps them get through some of these things. And we also see kind of what running means to them and how that's not how people don't always share abilities or interests for the same reason. And we also see what running means to them and how it's different for each of them, and just really, really loving this series. Number 14, what is a series that you finally bailed on after holding on to it for a long time? So this is another one I kind of tweaked a little bit because it wasn't necessarily that I was planning to continue this series for a long time and then finally admitted that I wasn't going to or that I didn't want to. It was more that well, I'll explain when I talk about the book. So unfortunately, the one I'm going to mention for this question is the Magnus Chase series by Rick Riordan. I read the first book earlier this year. That was another live show. I felt bad that I didn't enjoy the book, but I have really enjoyed, like, I really loved the Percy Jackson books and the Heroes of Olympus books. I think those series are really excellent. And I think this book just, this plus some things I have heard about the Trials of Apollo, like, I just don't think Rick Riordan's later work interests me as much. I also didn't like the first book in the Kane Chronicles, so I think I've like found the books from Rick Riordan that I enjoy and that I want to continue to reread. And the other ones I just don't enjoy as much. Like, I just really didn't like Magnus as a main character. And I absolutely understand, like, he's going through a lot, some really difficult things, so it makes sense that he would be kind of abrasive. But the thing that bothered me about him is, for like 80% of the book, his whole thing was like, I don't care about any of this. Like, I don't care about anything. This is all stupid. I don't want to be here. I don't care. And it just got to the point where I'm like, if the main character doesn't even care what's happening in this book, why would I care about what's happening in this book? And I also just, the humor didn't work for me in this one. It felt different from Rick Riordan's other books. and like the story just felt kind of repetitive and drawn out, and yeah, I just wasn't a fan. I did like some of the mythology elements. I thought some of the side characters were really interesting, but I just didn't enjoy this book very much, and I don't plan to continue the series. And I was actually really looking forward to trying the Trials of Apollo books because the idea of Apollo as a main character actually really interested me. But then I heard some things about developments later, and I don't want to read those either. So yeah, kind of bummed. I still really love Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus, but I just don't think Rick Riordan's later books have worked for me. Like, I haven't written him off as an author, so if he comes out with something else that I'm interested in, I would definitely be willing to try that. But yeah, this particular series I know gets a lot of love, and the first book just really didn't work for me. Number 15. What is the series you were most surprised that you liked this year? So I mentioned Small Spaces already. I'm not going to pull that book out of my giant stack again, because it's right at the bottom, but I was really, really surprised at how much I loved that one, because again, I could not stand the first two Winter Night books. And I just think like the character work, like I just think Ollie as a main character is just so much better developed than Vasya. Like, I just feel like the whole attitude about women and female characters in the Small Spaces series is just so much healthier and so much better, and I just really love those books. I think the friendships are great. I think the story is more interesting. Like, I just was truly astonished at how much I loved those books when I really didn't like the author's other work I had read. And I also want to mention The Bells by Danielle Clayton. So this is the first book in, I think it's going to be a trilogy. I don't know. Like, I haven't heard a lot of news on the third book. So this is a fantasy series that is kind of inspired by New Orleans. And I had heard really, really mixed things about this. I feel like this is one of those books where people were getting early copies and I was hearing a lot of positive buzz, and then after that kind of had died away, I just kept hearing negative reviews. Like, people were really disappointed in this one, and I went into this kind of hesitant, but I really, really enjoyed this. I thought the writing was great. I really enjoyed the setting. I really liked the way this book handled the themes of beauty and like cultural obsession with beauty and how dangerous that is. I think one of the criticisms of this book is that Camellia, our main character, didn't do enough, or that she didn't oppose these things strongly enough. And that didn't bother me, because like Camellia has grown up in this environment. She's grown up thinking that this is good and this is the way things are. So I actually think this book did a really great job of showing how she kind of gradually started noticing that things are not right and that something about this is wrong and that people are hurting. And I don't know, I just feel like that development was done really well. Like, I think this is a book about somebody who does not immediately realize that they are in like a terrible situation, or that they are a part of a group that is doing terrible things. I really enjoyed this. I also want to mention really quickly Rapunzel's Revenge by Shannon and Dean Hale, illustrated by Nathan Hale. This is the first in a graphic novel series that I just hadn't heard many people talk about. And Shannon Hale, I feel like, is a relatively well-known author, and I feel like graphic novels are starting to get more traction on BookTube. So I was just surprised I hadn't heard about this, because I am very picky about graphic novels, and I really loved this one. I really liked the kind of Wild West plus fairy tale setting. I really enjoyed the characters. I liked the art as well. So yeah, really enjoyed that. Number 16, what is a series that you meant to catch up with or finish this year that you didn't? And I have been meaning for years now to continue the Books of Bayern series by Shannon Hale. This is Enna Burning, which is the second book, which is the next one I need to read. I really enjoyed The Goose Girl, and again, I've just been meaning to continue for a while. So hopefully that happens in 2021. And then this book only came out in November, so I'm not that far behind, but considering this is one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and I was like, I couldn't wait for it. I was checking Goodreads reviews like so frequently to see what people thought, if anyone had gotten early copies, and now it's January and I still haven't read it. And that is The Camelot Betrayal by Kirsten White. This is the second book in the Camelot Rising series, and I know that book one got very mixed reviews. I really loved it. I have not really enjoyed the two other books by Kirsten White I have read, but The Guinevere Deception just really, really worked for me. So I'm really excited about reading the second book, but obviously that has not happened yet. And then finally, number 17 is, what is a series you finished this year that you think is greater than the sum of its parts? Which I think is such a cool question. And the one I wanted to mention is Night of the Dragon by Julie Kagawa. This is the third and final book in the Shadow of the Fox trilogy, and I really enjoyed every book in the series. I think I gave them 4 stars, each of them 4 stars, but as a whole, I would rate this series 5 stars, just because I think, like, the way that everything resolves in this book, it, like, hurts, but enjoyably. I fell in love with these characters so much. I really enjoyed the world. This is another one where I know that the first book gets very mixed reviews. It's hit or miss for people, and I can acknowledge that in some ways some of the characters feel kind of like archetypes a little bit, but they're archetypes I really enjoy, so it didn't bother me. And there's just something about the way Julie Kagawa wrote them that just made me really love and connect to the characters anyway. I really enjoyed the world. I thought the plot was done really well, and I really liked, like, this is a mark of how much I enjoy the series, is the first book, a lot of it is a journey book, and I still loved it. And we know I don't like journey books. Yeah, and I just think that the way that everything concludes in this book, it's like, it feels very earned by the story, and I just, yeah, I love these characters, and I love this world, I love this series, and this is definitely one where I really enjoyed each individual book in the series, but as a whole, I think this series is even better than that. Okay, everybody, so that was the book series tag, or the series tag for 2020. I feel like I have been talking a long time, so hopefully I can edit this down, but I just read a lot of great books and series this year, and I love that this gives me a way to kind of focus on some of those, and I definitely read more, like, continued more series or made progress on more series than I thought, considering that I didn't like intentionally make that a goal throughout the year. There are even a couple series that I like started and finished in the year, so that's always exciting. I mean, they were trilogies, but still, that's exciting. Please comment down below and let me know what you have thought of any of these books, if you have read them, or if you're going to pick them up, or a series that you're really enjoying right now. Just talk to me in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!